Okay, good.
I have, yeah.
Okay, terrific.
So I have, yeah, Yehudit and yeah.
Okay, so this do a Balat Ov part 2. And also take that and then take this.
Okay.
Okay, so the last time we met 2 weeks ago, we talked about Ba'alat Ov. We finished the story of Ba'alat Ov, and we saw, I think, some really interesting things about Ba'alat Ov, particularly the comparison with Abraham Avinu, which I think is really something startling.
That's it.
Right. Today we're going to learn a story, which is one of the most enigmatic stories. Classical Mefarshim, modern commentators, sort of raise their hand a little bit. It's an unknown story about women, false prophets. And it's tucked away in the book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel chapter 13, women, false prophets.
Wow.
It's a whole little description that's really not known. So if you go to Ba'alat Ov, the last page of Ba'alat Ov, where it says, Hamit Nabot Milipen, do you see where that is? Alrighty. Okay, good. I brought you the psukim also in English because the words are hard in Hebrew. We're going to read it in Hebrew. We're going to explain it. We're going to try to understand it, but I'm telling you from the start that we're not going to be able to really understand everything because it's a perfect example of we're not living in the ancient world, and there's certain codes and descriptions here that we can't grasp 100%. Mm-hmm. Alrighty. So here we go. We're in Sefer. Okay, so first of all, Sefer Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel. Yechezkel was a prophet, and this is a plug for next semester's course, A Day in the Life of a Prophet. Yechezkel was a prophet who lived during the time of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. It's a very, very traumatic period. And what's fascinating in terms of the Tanakh is that we have 2 prophets that are living almost exactly at the same time. One is prophesying in Israel, that's Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and one is prophesying in Babylonia, in Bavel, and that's Yechezkel. Yechezkel has already been sent out with a whole contingency of about 10,000 Jews to Babylonia. And so we have two major prophets who are prophesying at the same time in different locations. Mm-hmm. And very, very often the themes that they're talking about overlap. And we also know there's correspondence between the 2 centers. We know that some of Yechezkel's nivuot end up in Eretz Yisrael, and some of Yirmiyahu's nivuot end up coming to Bavel. So it's really a very exciting period. We have this fertilization going on, this cross-fertilization. One of the major problems at the time was the problem of false prophets. False prophets are promising the Jewish people things that are not true. Right. And it becomes a very, very tremendous challenge for the true prophets, right? The true prophets who are saying opposite of what the false prophets are saying.
No wonder why they're throwing tomatoes at them.
Right. So in both books we hear about false prophets, mm-hmm. but only in Sefer Yechezkel do we have a section about female prophets, mm-hmm. and that's what we're going to see now. Okay, that's chapter 13. So here we are. Like I said, we'll read the psukim in Hebrew. So we're not on yet the source sheet from today. We're on Ba'alat Ov. Janie, you're on the wrong sheet. Ba'alat Ov, the last page of Ba'alat Ov. Okay, that last page from last week's source sheet.
What was the date last?
It was 2 weeks ago because last week was the Tiyul.
So it was December 28th.
It was last year then.
Right, something like that. I don't know. I don't remember.
The 4th of January.
4th of January?
Yeah.
January 4th. It was January 4th. Okay.
It was this year. Okay.
Okay, so does everyone see where we are before we move forward? Yeah?
It looks like this.
Okay, so here we go. Vata ben Adam. God is speaking to Yechezkel, and you, the son of man, and it's a nickname that God nicknames Yechezkel. Tens of times he's called you son of man. Sim panecha el benot amcha. Place your face towards the women of your people. Hamit nabot milibhen. What does that mean? Who are prophesying from their heart, meaning they are false prophetesses. Vihinave alehen. And say the following prophecy to them. All right, so now he's talking to the false prophets about them. Ve'amarta ko amar Hashem Elokim. So says God. Hoy lemitafrot kesatot al kol atzilei yadai. Ve'osot hamispachot al rosh kol koma. Woe to those who sew pillows onto the arms, whatever that means. Ve'osot and make mispachot. The Mefarshim believe that mispachot are like mitpachot, okay? They make some kind of headgear. and place them on the heads of kol koma, those that come to them. We're not sure what on. Litzoded nefashot, to hunt souls. Hanefashot sodedena la'ami unefashot lachen techayena. All right, so they're hunting these souls, and they're trying to keep some souls alive for their own sake. Okay, we'll see what this means.
So they get a profit on it.
Right, the same kind of profit. I'm on Pasuk Yutet. Vatechalelna oti. What are you doing? You're profaning my name. El ami, to my nation. Bisha'alei se'orim. For what? For a fist, a handful of barley. Ufdif tote lechem. And what? Little bits of bread, crumbs of bread. Lahamit nefashot asher lo timutena. To kill souls that what? Should not be killed. Ulachayot nefashot asher lo techayena. And to give a positive prophecy that they're going to live to people that what? Are doing evil. Because bechem le'ami, you are lying to my nation, shom'ei kazav. And the nation is what? Is listening to what you're saying. Pasuk Chaf. Lachein ko amar Hashem Elokim. Now comes the punishment, right? So saith God. Hineni el kiskotochena. This is really tongue twisters, right? Those little pillows that you have, asher etena mitzodedot shamet hanefashot leparchot, that you use in order to what? Hunt the souls of the people, in order to have them fly. What does fly here mean? The Mefarshim say to fly to Gehenna, all right, but it's not clear. V'karati otam me'al zrotechem. I'm going to rip them off your arms. V'shilachti et hanefashot asher aten mitzodedot. I'm going to set free those souls that you are hunting at nefashot leparchot. V'karati, and Pesuk Chaf Aleph. The karati at mispochatechem. I'm going to also rip off that headgear. Veitzalti et ami miyadchem. I'm going to save my nation from your hands. V'lo ye'od biyadchem. They will no longer be in your hands. L'mitzudata. Be hunted. V'yadena ki ani Hashem. And you will know that what? I am God. Pesuk Chavbet. Ya'an hachot leiv tzadik. Because you've made the heart of a tzadik, grieve. Sheker. Because of what? Lies. V'ani lo hichaftiv, and I didn't want him to grieve. Ulechazek yedei rasha levil tishuv midarko hara lahachayoto. And by giving false prophecies, what? To the wicked, and therefore you stop those wicked people from what? Returning to me. Lachein shav lo techazena, therefore no more false visions for you. V'kesem lo tiksamena, and you will no longer divinate. V'hitzalti et ami biyadchem v'yadatem ki ani Hashem. All right, and I will save my nation from your hands, and you will know that I am God. Right, we have a detailed description of these women and also what they're doing. I mean, we don't understand what they're doing, but look how many psukim are being what? Are talking about the way they were prophesying. To the best of my knowledge, this is the most detailed account of false prophecy in terms of their what they're doing in all of Tanakh. Where do we ever read about the techniques that they're using? They're techniques that are being described here. We don't really understand what the technique is. We'll see what Mefarshim do with it. But it's really something outstanding that tucked away in Sefer Yechezkel, we have this description. Alrighty, so what does it mean? Okay, so first of all, the first thing that is interesting is that they're described to us as mit nabot miliben, right? They are prophesying from what? From their heart. Now look under the English here. Notice the word lehit nabot is in the hit pa'el. Now what is unique about the hit pa'el tense? Lehit labesh.
It's something.
It reflects on yourself, right? So these are women who are trying to what? They're trying to prophesize, and therefore we have the hipel form. Let's look now in Sefer Shmuel. In Sefer Shmuel, we're told about a band of male Nevi'im. What are we told? Shaul is told all kinds of signs. Achar kein tavo givat ha'Elohim, you will come to the mountain of God. Asher sham netzivei ha'plishtim. V'hikevo achar sham, when you get there. Ufagat ha'chevel nevi'im. You'll meet a band of nevi'im. Yordim me'habama, that are coming back down from the sanctuary. Ulifnehem nevel v'tof v'chalil v'kinor. What are they going to have with them? Musical instruments. V'hema mitnab'im. Here again, we also have what? They're prophesying, but in the reflexive. Not mitnab'im. What?
No, it says
right. Not menab'im, but mitnab'im. So what does the Abar Binel tell us? Ki kol magid atidot nikra mitnabeh. V'ra'oi sheteda sheyesh hefresh gadol bein navi uben mitnabeh. Right? There's a clear difference between someone who is prophesying and someone where the prophecy is in the what? The hit pa'el form. Ki hanavi hu hamushpa be'emet me Hashem yitbarach. The navi, someone who is getting his prophecy from God. והמצנבא הוא האיש המכין עצמו ומשתדל לדעת העתידות. What is mitznabeh in the reflexive? He's learning to be a Navi. He's trying to be a Navi. He's doing all the actions that you could do in order to get Nevuah. He's
putting a lot of effort in.
putting a lot of effort. He's isolating himself and he's thinking about important things. And often we know that music helped somebody put them in a positive frame of mind. And when someone was in a positive frame of mind, they were more ready going to what? To receive prophecy.
But also in Sefer Shmuel, we learn, say, and we're talking not right, that this band of people that Shaul met.
No, they're just prophesying. I think that's a different story. I think they're talking fine, but it's just hinting to us that what? They are apprentices. These are people who are apprenticing to become what? Nevi'im, Navi school, right? And they're trying to become Nevi'im. So all I'm saying is that if we go back to our women, from the verb mit nabot, we see very clearly that what? Even the verb itself, even if we didn't have the word mili pen, the word itself is showing us that what? They're trying to do something, but they don't really have what? It doesn't seem to have nivuah or power. So let's try to understand what is their technique with the pillows. So look at Rashi. All right, Rashi says the following: woe to those who sew cushions. They would sew something like small cushions and hang them on the armpits of those consulting them. And they would divine with those cushions with a false divination. And to those whom they wish, they would tell a favorable divination. And to whom they wish, they would tell an unfavorable. And then we have the veils on their heads, right? The mispachot. What does he say? They too are made to divine with, but I do not know what they are. Since it says in the verse, I shall tear them, I say they are of cloth to ensnare souls. With them they ensnare souls for Gehenna, etc., etc. Alrighty, so we see here that Rashi is saying that these, what do you call it? These avizarim, these pillows and these mispachot, they were used what? In order to try to, for their divination, and that all of it is lies. Alrighty? And then he says at the very end, for you take reward for this and thereby earn a livelihood. Okay, so when it says and it helps you sustain your own soul, they would get what? They would get paid for what? For their actions. All right, that's how Rashi explains the cushions and the headgear. Let's look at Rav Yoshiyahu Mitrani, an Italian commentator. What does he say? Hayu lemitparot elu hanashim hakashvaniyot v'hakosmot. Okay, they're wizards and divinators. Vosot atzman neviot. They act like they're what? Prophetesses. Vehem yoshvot bege'ava. Right? They sit proudly. Mipnei sheba'im kol ha'am v'sholim lahem b'kis mehem, because the people are coming to get divination. V'tofrot kisatot mileot muchin onotza lismoch alehem. What do they say? They filled pillows with what? With feathers in order to prop themselves up. According to Rav Yoshiyahu Mitrani, the pillows and the headgear was not what? Wasn't part of the actual divination itself, but it was part of their what? Part of their costume, or part of their getup, or part of the setting or the context of how the scenario. They wanted to make themselves look important, so they had a whole, it's like, I always think of I don't know if you ever did this, but in America or wherever, when you would go to the circus and they had like the fortune tellers in the rooms. I don't know if you ever did you ever go into the fortune tellers?
Well,
and you go into,
seen it in movies.
And they're all sitting there, they have their outfits on and whatever. So too here, that's what Yishayam was trying to. It's all part of trying to create an image, right? An image of what they're doing. Right. Alrighty? So that's how he explains it.
And it's also a reflection of their gava, of their pride.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Their stature.
Right.
They make themselves big.
Right, exactly. All right, so we see two different ways of looking at it because we're not really sure what it is.
The biblical gypsies.
The biblical too, exactly, which is really amazing. Okay, yeah. And then we go on to what are they getting? They're getting shares. We're told in the verses they're getting handfuls of what? Barley and little pieces of bread, right? Crumbs of bread. So look what Rashi says. Who measure regarding the barley and morsels of bread that they take as a fee to slay souls that will not die. Okay, so according to Rashi, this was their payment. They actually divinated in order to get a few slices of bread and to get some barley. And we know that barley is fodder for what? For animals. Okay, it wasn't fodder for people. Meaning, this is describing to us the difficult straits that the Jews were in at this time. In the time of Yechezkel, we have in Eretz Yisrael, we have the siege on Jerusalem, and people are starving, and there's a paucity of food. Alrighty? If you go for a moment, if you open your Tanakh just for a moment to Sefer Yecheskel, chapter 4.
And yet people had money to go to fortune tellers, or at least
You know, well, we'll talk about that. You're right. You're talking. You know something? When people are desperate,
they
people
want
are desperate.
They want to grasp at
Yes,
something.
yes, and we'll see that in a moment. Okay. So if you look in Sefer Yecheskel, chapter 4, and if you go to verse 10, we're told about the terrible siege of Jerusalem, and we're told about the scarcity of food. He has to do it a symbolic act. Okay, so we're in chapter 4, verse 10. All right, and he says, Ma'alcha asher tochlenu. Okay, the amount of food that you're going to eat, b'mishkol esrim shekel liyom, it's going to weigh 20 shekel per day. Me'et ad eight tochlenu. You're only going to eat what? From time to time. Umayim b'mesurat tishteh. What does that mean?
Measured out.
Measured out water you're going to drink. Shishi tahin. Me'et ad eight tishteh. V'ugat se'orim tochlanu, and the food that you're going to make is from se'orim, and se'orim is what? Not lowly. V'hi begelelei se'at ha'adam, which will be cooked on the feces of man, meaning they will not have enough wood, they will not have enough kindling material, and they will have to burn the feces of people in order to cook their barley cakes. So this is describing a horrendous situation during the time of coming up to preceding the Chorban of the first Beit HaMikdash. And so if we connect that, according to Rashi and others, to what are these women getting? Handfuls of what? Of barley or bread. It's certainly, we can understand that because to us, that was something in light of the situation that was going on. Alrighty? So even though times are terrible and there's really no one has any food, yet they, like we pointed out, when you're desperate, what do? You turn to somebody hoping for what? For a better future. And you know, it's always hashgacha prati. But here I was, we're reading this book. This is a plug for our Frat library. Our Frat library is amazing. It's just amazing. Every time I go in there, I find amazing books. Amazing books. Okay. Anyway, so this is a book. It's about a second generation. She's writing about her mother who survived Auschwitz. A very interesting book. She is actually a writer, and she knows Steven Spielberg, so it's a little bit of a twist.
Can you say the title of the book and the author slowly?
Yes, it's called The Net of Dreams by Julie Salomon.
Thank you.
Okay. So in any event, in chapter 8, I'm reading this book, and all of a sudden, she says the following. She's describing her mother who survived she was from Hungary, who survived Auschwitz, and she says, from time to time, my mother, her name is Simi, will remember the fortune teller in Auschwitz, the Jewish woman who had learned her magic from gypsies. Everyone,
From who?
gypsies. Everyone in the barracks had felt
Who were
protective.
also in the camps.
Yeah, had felt protective toward her. Though theirs was designated the children's barracks, only 4 little ones lived there, and 2 of them belonged to the fortune teller. Simi took comfort from her recollection of the time the woman had read her hand. The woman seemed to have no doubt about what she saw there. She, Simi, would survive, and when she came out, she would meet somebody whom she would marry and have a very, very good life. As the years went by, she would think with satisfaction, that woman really knew what she was talking about. She might pause a minute to wonder if the woman herself had survived. Simi was fairly sure she hadn't. She had 2 small children with her, and mothers of young children didn't have a good chance to survive. Her memory of this occurrence was vivid and precise, and it gave her particular pleasure because it suited her own prognostication. Everything will turn out fine. In fact, however, her memory was faulty, or as she herself would put it, selective. Her memory of the fortune teller was only half a memory. On a cold day in the spring of 1971, the image of the fortune teller appeared in her head, as it had many times before. Only this time the vision was untouched by Simi's editing pencil. There she was, holding the hand of young Simi, both of them dressed in rags, head shaved in Auschwitz. The fortune teller was smiling, happy to tell her subject what she wanted to hear. You will meet somebody, you will marry, and have a very good life. Then she paused. What's wrong? The young Simi asked the fortune teller, whose face had become quite grim. The woman pushed Simi's hand away and said abruptly, I don't know what will happen. Simi put her hand back into the woman and asked, what is it? Again, the woman refused to look. She shrugged. That's all. I really don't know. The woman might have been telling the truth, or she might have been covering up. As usual, given 2 possible interpretations, my mother, Simi, chose the one that conformed most closely to her own desire. From then on, whenever she told the story of the Jewish gypsy woman, she deleted the ambiguous ending. She was satisfied to declare the shortened version a historical fact. It had served her well for many years. She had survived, she had met someone when she came out, and she was having a very happy life. There seemed no need to speculate on the possibilities of the fortune teller's pause, to experience again the cold fear she felt in Auschwitz when the gentlewoman had refused to re-examine her hand. She was willing to remember only the fortune teller's smile, her obvious delight in being able to help offer to allay Simi's misery. She successfully erased the sorrowful contortion on the woman's face when she set Simi's hand aside and refused to elaborate on what she saw, where, and when Simi asked her. She was willing to forget her own eagerness to let it go at that, to accept what the fortune teller had said and not think about what she hadn't. Yet she could no longer do that anymore. Her husband was now going to die, and even then she could not conjure a miracle or even pretend that she had. I just found it fascinating, the idea of the gypsy in Auschwitz, and they would go to this woman in order to read their hands and so on.
That gave her hope.
To give them hope. It could give them hope. It's interesting. I mean, again, we don't really know. I'm being very, very cautious. This, like I told you, is very enigmatic, our description. We don't really know the specifics of what's happening. But people are going there, But people are going there to try to understand what's going to happen. It's a very traumatic time period in terms of Jewish history. We're nearing the Churban, all right? And we have a plethora of false prophets. Okay, so in any event,
Very vague, and unless you're specific and saying thus and thus and thus is going to happen, just like Moshe Rabbeinu with whatever the earth opening up, it's always very general, and it could be now, it could be like just like the false Messiah Shabbat. It could be now, it can be
it's like the horoscopes, where you read the horoscope and it could almost be anything. You could fit it in.
Anyone.
Right. So anyway, according to Rashi, the barley and the stuff was to pay the woman. But look at now the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel says differently. עוד סיפר קסם ותחבולה אחרת, שהיו עושות באומרו ותחלנה אותי עמי בשעלי שעורים ופתי לחם, והוא אצלי, now he's going to explain what he thinks it means. עניין הגורלות. What are גורלות? What are גורלות? Lots. שגם היום עושות הנשים השאננות שמשליכות השעורים, וכפי הנחתם ומקומות נפילתם, Yishpatu mai sheyeh. According to the Abarbanel, he used, it's like rolling a dice. He used the barley and also the bread in order to do some kind of lottery.
Or like coffee reading.
V'chein hu ptitei lechem, hapititim aktanim shemashlichim oto b'oto aderech, shemashlichim hasarim, okay, etc., etc. Alrighty, so according to the Abarbanel, they were not used as a payment, but they were used actually to divinate. Those kind of things.
Like beads, kind of.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that Mepharshim are trying to make sense of this description, but it's not simple. Okay, if you go now to the new sheet from today, if everyone got it. Did everyone get the sheet from today? If not, come. I'm just going to show you a modern, all right, now we're going to the modern world. And again, very unclear what we do with these women, okay? Okay.
Thanks.
And this is from an article that I found. Again, there's very, very little written that I've seen about these women. But this is a modern article that I've seen about them. So what does she say? The following. She says, as mentioned above, the language of binding and unbinding and the tying and untying of knots is... Do you see where I am?
No.
You start with Nancy Bowen.
Nancy Bowen? Do you see what that is? Nancy Bowen?
Yeah.
Okay.
After the first sentence.
Yeah. Okay.
But it doesn't say.
Do you see?
It does. The end of the sentence.
Okay, the end of the
Okay, that's the name of the article if someone wants to look it up. The daughters of your people, female prophets in Ezekiel. Okay, someone wants to look up the article. As mentioned above, the language of binding and unbinding and tying of knots is language typical of Mesopotamian anti-witchcraft rituals. Binding rites were also linked to prescriptions designed to prevent sorcery from causing miscarriages. The rite including tying on a band made from cloth and would both physically and magically keep the fetus from emerging. Similarly, in incantations preceding the actual birth, there are references to the removal of such bands. The use of grain and bread occurs in rituals and incantations related to childbirth in two ways. First, at the time of delivery, the midwife makes a circle of flour on the floor, into which an unbaked brick is placed, a place protected by demons. Second, rituals designed to ward off hungry demons, who sought to devour infants, involved offering of bread and flour to send the demons in full. That these women are prophets, part of whose role is that of a medical professional in relation to women in childbirth, would also give insight into the expression in verse 19, to put to death those persons who should not die, and preserve alive those persons who should not live. One of the roles of the female prophet might also be a prognosis through divination if her patient will live or die. Ezekiel would thus be indicating these women for medical malpractice, indicting them for medical malpractice, for giving false prognoses. Again, I'm just pointing out to you, look at the different opinions. Literally, we don't know. But these women are doing wrong in God's eyes,
Right.
and they are falsely, their prophecy is false. Alrighty? So
They're delving into forbidden waters here.
because they're saying things, they're saying prognoses that are not based on what God wants them to say.
God
Right.
is
Now, before we finish, I just want to point out that our women's section is part of a much larger prophecy, which also talks about male prophets, false prophets. And let's just see, I made you a chart. Let's just compare and see something interesting. Yeah.
The title, when it says, they say what's in their heart, so you're not talking about someone who knows that what they're saying is wrong, but someone who believes that it's true, or you're talking about someone who knows the false prophet is someone who knows that this is not God's word, and it's a remote.
I can't answer that question.
So, because the question is, if you call someone a witch or whatever, if they're just superstitious things that people believed in when they didn't understand in the world, and they do these things, they hear things are passed on.
I think it's more than superstitious. I mean, they're telling people you're going to live and you're going to die. I mean, they're giving prognoses to people. It's a lot more than just
No, what they
superstition.
believe in and how they determine it is
That I can't tell you. I can't tell you.
So-
But it's interesting because we're going to compare them to the male false prophets, and we're going to see a difference. Okay, so maybe that will help answer your question partially. Alrighty, so look at them right side, the male. Nivi'ei milibam, they're also what? Prophesizing from their heart. Alrighty, so look at, we're on the top chart. Ben Adam, hinave el nivi'ei Yisrael hanibaim. Prophesies to the men who are to the male prophets who are prophesying. Notice nibaim and not what? Mit nabim. It's not in the hit pa'el. It's in the regular PL form, right? Which is interesting. V'amarta l'niviyei milibam. Listen to the word of God. Ko amar Hashem Elokim. Hoi woe al haniviim hanivalim. Asher holchim achar rucham ubilti ra'u. Meaning they're saying false prophets. Chazu shav v'kesem. They what? They see falsehood and divination. Kazav, and they're saying Haomrim ne'um Hashem. They say in the name of God. The Hashem lo shalacham vayichalu l'kayim davar. So they are prophesying in God's name, and they did not see, and they haven't been seen. All right. So we have males and females all both at the same time, but yet the males are not in the hipel form, whereas what? The females are. Look underneath the chart. Tova Ganzel did her doctorate on Sefer Yechezkel, and look what she just tells us about our men. Yitachein him hayu elu nevi'ei emet shesatu min haderech. What does that mean? They were real prophets who what? Left the way of God. Asher haya lehem potential lekabbalah nevuat me Hashem. They had the potential to receive the right nevuah. Umishum kach yachlu bekalut lahatot et ha'am. And that's why they were so successful in what? In fooling the people, because they were at one point true prophets. All right, so we see here a very big difference.
You can have a true prophet who then
Yes.
becomes false.
Oh, yes.
Well, how are you supposed to know?
Good. That's a tremendous problem. That's the problem.
Probably
At the time of the Churban,
Wait and see.
right? So if we're going to compare our women and our men now, we see a difference. These were male prophets who
Started out right.
started out being real prophets, had the potential to receive prophecy, and they veered off the path. Whereas our female prophets here don't seem to be women who were ever what? Prophets to begin with. They were women who what? Who were
Looking for prophets.
divinating and trying, but they had their heebie-jeebies.
Don't we have stories about women who were prophets? Like, wasn't Huldah? a
Yeah, we will talk
Yeah, they
about.
were.
We'll talk
There
about the
were
next.
some real
Yeah,
female
but not these women.
Hashem.
But not these women.
False.
They were.
But it's
Alrighty.
interesting, because like in the Torah, when Nadav and they come to Moshe to tell him, and Moshe said, I wish everybody were not prophets.
With what Eldad and Medad,
Yes.
correct? And mitnabim b'machana. Yeah, but there, if you look at certain mafarshim, will point out that they're on the derech, but they have not yet reached that point. Yeah. Okay, so we see a difference right between the men and women. Let's see another difference. Look at another difference. The content. What was the woman's content? We said, you will live and you will die, right? And it didn't matter.
Did it through pillows.
They did it whatever they
throwing
wanted. You will live and you will
barley.
die. Let's look at the male content on the right side. Nevi'ei Yisrael hanib'im el Yerushalayim v'hachozim lachazon shalom ve'ein shalom ne'um Hashem. They're not prophesizing you're going to live or
This is on
die.
a national
A
level.
national prophecy. Don't listen to Ezekiel. Don't listen to Jeremiah that the temple is going to be destroyed. It's going to be good. Everything is fine. Don't worry about Iran. Don't worry about right? They're talking about, they have national proportions to their nivuot. So there's a
They also wanna
huge
bring
difference.
hope.
What?
They also want to bring hope to the nation. That we're
Correct.
not going to be destroyed. We want peace.
Correct.
And that's what they want to hear.
So therefore, we have
Yeah.
we're seeing now a tremendous difference between what? Between our men and our women. One is a very personal kind of thing, going into the circus and going into the tent, right? And whatever, getting your little prophecy. I'm not minimizing it because it was big enough for God to tell Ezekiel what? Tell these women
To stop.
stop. Exactly. So it wasn't something minor like that. But you can't it's not comparable to telling the nation on a national level what's going to be the future what? Of Yerushalayim.
So this is worse.
All right, it is worse, the men, exactly. And now let's look at their punishments. Okay, the punishment for the men is, we're back at, V'haita yadi al hanevim hachozim shav haksamim kazab besod. Okay, here again, no one's really sure what it means. Besod ami lo yihiyu. They will not be part of what? The nation, whatever that means. Ubichtav Beit Yisrael lo yikatevu. They will not be written into the house of Israel, meaning
It's correct.
Correct.
okay, karet and or their lineage or something. Ve'el admat Yisrael lo yavo, and they will not return the land of Israel when the Geula comes. And then in another verse in Pasuk Yud Gimel, and I bring it here. Some of them will actually. Pasuk Yud Dal talks about that they will die. Okay, they will die when the destruction comes. Whereas, what is the punishment for the women? There is none.
There is none. Just tell them to stop.
God's ripping off their pillows, right? And their mitpachot, right? But there's no specific punishment that's being given to
They
these
don't
women.
die.
There seems to be that the text is sort of sympathetic, a little bit sympathetic to these women, perhaps, if we look in light of the situation that Rashi describes. It's the time of the Churban and people are starving and
They were
people are coming to them
starving.
and they're trying to put food on their table.
Right.
But it's interesting that that no punishment is given. Righty? So in any event, this is the only example in all of Tanakh of a situation like this, the only story, and we're still
And thanks for
grappling
bringing it.
and we're still grappling with it, as you see. We're not
Yeah.
really sure what's being described, but it's very. By contrasting it to the males, we see a very, very big difference, a personal level as opposed to a national level, and the punishments are different as well.
Well,
Alrighty?
but maybe they're more similar to the Mayaldot in Mitzrayim, even though in such a bad situation, they're still trying to bring
Mhm.
life. It sounds it was connected more to midwifery and stuff like that.
Yeah, but in God's eyes, they're telling people who are tzaddikim, you're a rasha, and then they're telling Risha'im, you're a tzaddik, and therefore, in terms of their behavior, it's making things worse. And also hope, in terms of hope. They're giving hope to the wrong people. That's what the Pesukim are saying. Okay, with that we're finished, and now we're moving on to our next story, which we're leaving witches behind. All right, those are we have touched on basically every story in Tanakh. If someone asks you about witches, if your child comes home from school and asks about witches in Tanakh, you could say, I can tell you, I know all the stories, right? There are no more to talk about. This is it. All right, you are a witch Tanakh specialist. How's that? Bewitched, right? Okay, so now we're going to move on to another story. We're going to move on to the story of a widow, and it's a story of a woman from Tekoa. Who lives here in Tekoa? We have
I
Tekoa.
just came home from Tekoa, from my
Alrighty.
friend's house.
And our story of the woman in Tekoa is a story in Sefer Shmuel Bet.
Shachachama.
It's in Sefer Shmuel Bet, and we have to understand what's leading up to the story. David had many children from different wives, and he had a beautiful daughter by the name of Tamar, and his son Amnon fell in love with Tamar, his sister,
Half-sister.
right, half-sister. But he knew that he wouldn't be able to marry her taking the legal route, so he and a friend conjure up this idea that he's going to become sick, and he's going to ask his father to send Tamar to prepare food for him, and then when they're alone, he's going to rape her. And so David does that. David sends Tamar to help, and she prepares a meal, and he sleeps with her and he rapes her, and then he throws her out of the house. Now, after this happens, Tamar, who came from another mother, has a full sibling, and her full sibling's name is Avshalom. Avshalom is her full brother, and Avshalom is obviously tremendously pained about what happens, and he's going to take everything into his own hands because he sees that his father, Didn't do anything after the rape, meaning his father. It tells us in the verses. Let's look in the verses. Open up now. Anyway, we have to go there to say for Shmuel Bet.
Born afterwards, he's much younger than.
Shmuel Bet.
No, Avshalom, wasn't he at the same time, he was at the same age about it?
Of whom?
You said Avshalom was born after this all happened.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. say that.
No. He's gonna.
thought you said
Okay.
that.
So going to say for Shmuel Bet. We're in chapter 13, and let's look. Look in verse 20. Verse 20.
Chapter?
Chapter 13, Pasuk Perek Yud Gimel, verse 20. Already, so Tamar has been raped. She's been kicked out of the house. She comes to Avshalom's house because that's her full brother, and she is obviously traumatized and so on. Pasuk Chaf. Vayomer eleha Avshalom. Avshalom says to her, Achiha ha'ninon achicha haya imach. Was our brother, your brother Amnon, is he who did this to you? She said to her, it's your brother, be quiet, don't publicize what happened. And so she sits there desolate in Avshalom's house. Now look at David's reaction. V'hamelech David shama et kol hadrim ha'ele. Okay, David heard what happened. Vayichar lo ma'od, and he's tremendously pained.
Excuse me, which pasuk is this now?
Now on Chav Bet, 22. Velo diber Avshalom im Amnon. Okay, and that's it. Meaning he's very pained, David, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything. Velo diber Avshalom im Amnon lemerad atol. Avshalom refuses to speak to his brother Amnon who raped her. Ki saneh Avshalom et Amnon al davar asher ina et Tamar achuto. Right? So he does. So Avshalom hates Amnon. So what's going to happen next in the story is that Avshalom is going to cock up a plan. He's going to plan in order to murder Amnon. He's going to be the time of the shearing of the sheep. Remember we learned with the story of Tamar and Yudad, there's a party going on. He's going to ask his father to come to the shearing of the sheep ceremony. And his father's going to say, no. He wants his father and his brothers to come. And David's going to say, no, I don't want to be a burden on you. He says, if that's the case, please send me Amnon and the other brothers. And David says, why? Why do you need them? And he presses, and what happens? He says, okay. He sends Amnon and his brothers, and at that point, Avshalom sends a messenger, and he's murdered. Okay, Amnon is murdered. As a result, the older brother, the brother who raped Tamar, is murdered by his brother. All right. As a result of having his brother murdered, what does he have to do? He has to run away because he's been responsible for the murder of his brother. Are you following me? I know it's okay, I know. And so he runs away. Where does he run to? He runs to the area of Geshur, which is where the Plishtim live. Why? Because his mother comes from Geshur. Not of all of David's had all different. Go now just for a moment to Perek Gimel Pasuk Gimel, and you'll see it.
Was his mother?
Ma'acha.
Ma'acha
Yeah.
was what? She was from Plishtim?
From Geshur. Look in Perek Gimel Pasuk Gimel. This is before Shmuel Beg, right? Perek Gimel Pasuk Gimel. Umishneu kil'av la'avigail eshet Nabal. We're told the listing of his sons. V'hashlishi Avshalom ben Ma'acha bat Talmai melech Geshur.
What's Geshur?
Geshur is an area like in the area of Plishtim. So Avshalom runs to his grandfather. He runs to his grandfather in the area of Geshur.
He married a daughter of a Plishtim?
It's not a Plishtim.
What is he? Is he a Jewish?
Chazal will say that what? That
Converted?
I'm sure Chazal will say that she converted. Yeah, I mean, or I think they say she was an Eshet.
Like any other kings, they
Correct.
have to do territorial.
Correct. I think according to Chazal she was an Eshet Yifat Toar. He saw her in war and they took her. I think there's a backstory there a little bit. But that's the mother. Ma'acha is the mother of Avshalom and Tamar. All right. So now Avshalom runs away to Geshur, to his grandfather, to the family, to the mishpacha. He goes to his mishpacha. All righty. Yes.
Is that a near Miklat?
No.
No, not an area.
For our
Right.
Miklat.
All right. And so now what's happening? He's been there for 3 years in Geshur, and Yoav, David's general, knows that what?
That he's there.
That he's there, and that David wants him, is missing him. He's missing his son, Avshalom. But David legally cannot what? Bring him back, because after all, if he brings him back legally, some kind of punishment has to happen. Alrighty, so what does Yoav do? Yoav wants to convince David to bring him back, but he can't convince him directly because he can't do that. So he's going to hire a woman. He's going to hire a woman
lure him.
from Tekoa to tell a story, a mashal. Now we know in Tanakh that the mashal has can have a very powerful impact. For instance, when David, after David sins with Bathsheba, right, and that's quite a sin, Natan, the prophet, is going to now chastise him. But how can he get David to actually understand what he did wrong and not become defensive? He tells a story. He tells a mashal called Kifsat Tarash about the poor man's ooh, right? And as a result of that story, David declares something, and then what does Natan Hanavi say? That's you, that's you. And then David is able to what? He's internalized. Right. So now we have the same device that's going to be used. He's going to hire a woman, and she's going to tell a story. David's going to he's going to declare some kind of declaration regarding the story. And then what is the woman's job? Just basically say, this is you. But let's keep in mind, it's one thing
I don't want to be the messenger.
Exactly. It's one thing if Natan the Navi is doing this. We have a woman who is being hired for this job. Now, just think about that. Put yourself in that woman's place. She's got to be some heck of a woman, to take the job, and to be able to what? Pull off this job successfully.
So why couldn't the Navi do the same thing like he did with Kifsat Tarash?
Being the Navi himself tell the story? Because we're not talking about a Navi here. It's Yoav, the general. The general knows that he wants to bring him home. At the end of the day, this is going to be a mistake. Because Avshalom's going to come home, and what's going to happen a few chapters later? He's going to rebel against his father. This was a big mistake. Okay? But the device for bringing him home is going to be what? This woman. This almanah, this widow from Tekoa.
This was her profession?
So we don't know what her real profession was, but she's one heck of a lady, super talented, and like my hat goes off to her because, like I said, just taking this job, just the job description would make most people run away, right? All right?
So she has quite a reputation. Why did they turn to her to begin with? Why did they turn to her? She obviously
exactly.
had some
Yes. So let's just read the first few psukim. We'll just get started and then we'll finish up. We'll continue next week. Okay, so we're in Perek Yudalid now. Shmuel Bet, Perek Yudalid. That was all the backstory to understand it. Okay? Okay, so we're in Shmuel Bet, chapter 14. Vayeda Yoav ben Sruya ki lev hamelech al Avshalom. Yoav, his general, knew that David was pining, right, for Avshalom. Vayishlach Yoav Tekoa. Vayikach misham isha chachama. He sent to Tekoa and he took from there what? A wise woman. And we certainly understand what? Why we need a wise woman.
There's a street in Tekoa named the Wise
Right.
Isha.
Right? Okay. Vayomer eleha, and he says to her, hit abli, okay, mourn, v'livshina bigdei evel, and change your clothing into mourning clothing, v'al tasuchi shemen, and don't anoint yourself with oil, v'hayit ki isha ze yamim rabim mitabelet al meit. And what I want you to do, act as though you've been mourning for a very, very long time.
Oh, she wasn't doing almanah.
Uva nachon. This is part of the story. Okay? In quotes, almana. Ubata el hamelech, and come to the king. V'dibarta elav kadavar hazeh, and say the following. Vayasem Yoav et advarim b'fiha. And what does Yoav do? He tells her what to say. Now, ostensibly we might say, well, if he's telling her everything to say, why does she need to be what?
Wise.
Anisha chachama. But we're going to see she has to be super wise.
To pull it off.
Because there's no way, and we're going to see what transpires between the two of them. It's not even clear what does it mean he put all the words in her mouth. How is it possible? We're going to see how this, next week, we're going to see how this dialogue goes. How is it possible that Yoav could have what? Thought of every contingency of how David might respond. But in any event, we're going to need a wise woman. She has to be able to think on her feet.
Avshalom, right?
What?
They're sending the woman to Avshalom, not to David.
No, to David. The woman is being sent to David to convince him to let Avshalom come home. Okay? So now let's look on your sheet for a moment. All right, so regarding our almanah.
Can I just ask a really dopey question? Why couldn't David go visit Avshalom? David could travel, he's the king.
Because
Why couldn't he
he's
go
representing the kingdom, and his son has murdered his other son. I'm sure he was certainly torn inside emotionally. He missed him, but what kind of statement are you making that I'm going to visit a murderer who has not been brought to justice,
Well, that's
right?
the murder of the
And he's the king.
Okay.
so to speak, or the
Right, I
first
mean,
line.
clearly this is a very complicated case because why?
It was
Because
revenge.
he had raped his
it's
sister.
his honor.
But we also have to keep in mind all of this is happening after David has sinned with Bathsheba. What kind of example has David set for his children? After his sin with Bathsheba, we have the unraveling of what? We have anarchy happening in his home, all these terrible things happening. And he sort of knows that inside too, that he's partially responsible for what happened. So therefore it's very, very complicated. Yeah. All right, so look what the Radak says regarding this widow. He says the following. Hikir mitoch dvarav, vayirem me'amur lo b'perush v'shalach lo hadavar ayidei siba v'gilgul dvarim. Meaning, he knew that he missed him, but he knew that David couldn't what? Couldn't actually bring him home. Now, let's talk about the fact that he's sending an almanah, or she's supposed to be an almanah. In the Torah, we know the almanah is one of the most vulnerable women or people in society. Who else? Who's joined always with the almanah?
Children.
Ger, yatom, the almanah.
Orphans.
Okay, right. Those are the three categories that are constantly being brought up as the most vulnerable in society. And if someone on that level or that strata, what does the Torah allow them to do? Do you know? Well, what are they allowed to do in order to be heard? Because those are people that are not usually heard. They have the right in ancient Israel to what? To go up to the king and say what? Hear thee, O king, hear my story, hear my situation, hear my predicament. Where do we see that elsewhere? With Shlomo, who remembers? The two prostitutes with the baby, right?
Baby, yeah.
Here our predicament, O king. All right. So these lower level people, where harlots are basically, they're not almanot, right? But they are okay. They have this ability,
Even lower.
right? Even lower. All right. So that's why he's hiring a widow, because immediately when she tells her story as a widow, it's going to open up, David's heart in light of the case. I just want to talk about Tekoa for a moment. Why does he send to Tekoa? Why did Tekoa? So look at Rav Yosef Kara. Vaishlach Yoav Tekoa vayikach misham isha. She'ilu haya lokeach isha mirushalayim. If he took a local girl, haya David makira. All right, David would know who the woman is. I guess Yerushalayim was that small in the time of David.
Well, he seemed to get around.
Yeah, right. Lachach lakcha mitekoa. That's why he took him to Tekoa. Shehu rachok mirushalayim. Kedei shelo yakirenu
Your own
David.
2 feet or your donkey.
Okay, now he says it was far from. Now, how far is Tekoa from Yerushalayim?
Not that far at all.
Not that far. So we're going to see that there is another Tekoa.
Oh, there's another Tekoa.
Now look at the Radak. Look with Radak. Amru Rabotenu. Chazal tell us. Maishna Tekoa. Amar Yonatan mitoch sherigilin b'shemen. Tekoa is known for its oil. Chachma mitzuya behen. That's why they're wise, because we know that oil in Judaism is connected to what? To wisdom. Now he goes on. V'haita ha'ir hahi rabat zeitei shemen. It had many what? Olive trees. V'chein amru Tekoa alpha l'shemen. Rotzeh lamar ha'ir ha'meshubachat b'shemen. It's a city blessed with shemen, with oil. Be'eretz Yisrael haita Tekoa. V'fichach korei oto alpha l'shemen kemo she'alef whatever. V'haita ha'ir b'chelko shel Asher. Where is it? It was in the portion of Asher. Where is the portion of Asher, everybody? Up north. There's a Tekoa up north. And we know that Asher is blessed in the bracha and Sefer Devarim. V'toval b'shemen raglo. Okay, so in ancient Israel, there was another city called Tekoa. It was never, in the Tanakh, it never appears, this Tekoa up north. But in the eyes of Chazal, they all immediately hear Tekoa, and what do they say? It's the Tekoa of the north. Why? Again, because of the idea of wisdom. Wisdom is Shemen, because of the Shemen, and this is the wise woman. So we're not talking, no offense to the street name here in Tekoa, although bottom line is, it was what?
Well, there's
It was Tekoa. It was Tekoa. But in the eyes of Chazal and all the Mefarshim, they're all looking up what?
Where
Up north.
exactly up north?
Okay, so
Does it know?
we don't have to do it, but if you look at this in the next source is the Tosefta, which is the time of the Mishnah. It talks about Tekoa, and then it talks about Gush Chalav. And then if you go underneath it, another source talks about Meron and Gush Chalav. So it's in the area of Meron.
Meron.
The area of Meron.
Well, the Amos is in in this, when it says in Amos, Tekoa Mikmati,
Right.
which is why we also have.
Exactly, which is this Tekoa, right. But it's interesting that the Chazal link this woman from Tekoa, not from our Tekoa, but what? From all the way.
Just because of the olive oil?
That was
Because
it.
of the anointing?
Yeah, it would seem. It would seem. It's very interesting.
We have, they have olive over here,
Right.
when they have them in
It's
the
also
car, like,
shut
there
down.
are olives all over the country.
You're right, but this area is known by from the in the Tosefta as I guess it's flowing with oil. Okay. In any event, it's interesting. It's not okay. Alrighty. We'll just end off with the idea of save me. Right. She's going to say. Okay. Let's just 1 second. Let's look in pasuk. Well, we didn't read. Look in pasuk Dalet. Vatomer ha'isha hatekoit el hamelech. Vatipol al apeha arza. Vatishtachu. Vatomer Hoshia Hamelech. So what does she do? She prostrates before the king and says, save me. In ancient Israel, somebody who was needy, that was their way of getting judgment. Circumventing the what? The courts.
System.
Circumventing the system
That's amnesty?
and going right to the king. Yeah. And just look at one example. Look in, with this we'll finish. Sefer Melachim Bet. Go and Sefer Melachim Bet. Chapter Perek Vav, Pasuk Chavav. Yeah,
What?
Melachim Bet what?
Melachim Bet, Perek Vav, Pasuk Chavav.
Melachim Bet what?
Pasuk Chavav,
26.
No,
Right.
what chapter?
chapter 6,
Six.
verse
Oh,
26.
Vav? Okay.
It is? No.
Okay, Vav, Kafa?
Oh, right, I wrote this, right. Vav Chavav, right. All right. So there's a terrible famine, right? There's a matzor, there's a siege on the city of the Shomron, and things are very, very expensive. Look at Pasuk Chavhei. Vayhi Ra'av Gadol b'Shomron is the capital city of the northern section of Israel. V'hinei Tsarim aleha, terrible siege. Ad hayot Rosh Chamor, the head of a donkey would cost Shmonim kesef. V'rova hakav charyonim b'chamisha kesef. Okay, divyonim. We have a terrible price. Things are very expensive. It's hyperinflation. Vayhi Melech Yisrael over al hachoma, and the king is walking on the wall. Ve'isha tza'aka elav lemor Hoshia Adoni Hamelech. And what does she scream out? Save me, O king. So in ancient Israel, this was the way for those very vulnerable, or very often it's women who cry out to the king, and their case is heard, and very often they're saved in that way.
This was chapter 6, verse 26?
Yeah. Okay.
And then they love the palace.
Yes.
They
Yes.
can just leave it.
Yes, but I don't think she says Hoshia Nahamelech,
No.
right? This was like a certain,
Shia,
yeah. Alrighty, so we'll continue on next week, and we'll see how this is a woman who really is extraordinary.
Okay.
Right?
Exciting things to bring up.
And if anyone learns new things about our female prophetesses, false prophetesses, I'm happy to hear. With their own.
Seven.
No, but 7 is Chazal. 7 is Chazal.
Chazal.
Where it says Neviah, there's Miriam, there's Huldah, and Devorah. Those are the 3 where it says that says Navi. The other 4 you can infer that whatever, but it does not say Neviah. So the text, that right. So Chazal says 7, but the text tells us specifically 3. Right. Yeah, we can assume that there were more, but we don't know. There's also a woman named Noadiah Haniviyah. She's in Sefer Nehemiah, but it's very sketchy what exactly she is.
You know what I always think of when I think of female prophets? I don't know if you remember or if you read. Remember James Mishn's book, The Source?
Yeah.
And he has a whole chapter on a Jewish prophet.
Does it really? Okay, I have to go back to the
It's
book.
not a true story.
Oh,
It's
okay.
fiction.
Interesting.
But he took that concept. Yes. I think I read it when I was in high school.
Okay, I read it years ago.
Teenager.
Years ago.
Oh,
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
decades ago.
Interesting.
It should have named like Gomor.
Oh no, that's Gomer is Hosea. The book of Hosea. Hosea marries a woman. Gomer ben Batzivlayim. Maybe
So
it's referring to
maybe
that.
he is,
Yeah.
I don't remember.
She was the wife of a prophet, Hoshea's wife.
Okay, but this story about Mishnah wrote is fiction,
Yeah,
clearly.
but it could be he's basing on that
It could be
story.
based on that story.
That's interesting. That's very
But
interesting.
because this Gomer, I still remember that.
Pleasure. Bye.
She had to go to the well.
Bye.
She had to go into the cistern to get water. You know, it was
Yeah.
underground.
Okay.
You walked down into
Yeah.
a cave and there was
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
cistern.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember all these years, is, you know, I'm
So
over 70
interesting.
already. You know,
You still
that she had a
remember.
big cot on her head and she'd fill it and then she'd hear God's voice.
So he's
Like,
turning.
like the Shmuel story a little bit where he
he's
calls her, and there was a
turning.
her name I think was Gomer.
And it's
so
Gomer.
he-
He's turning
so
the
he
prophet.
played with all those
Yeah,
names.
that's so interesting. That's interesting.
I feel like I want to look it up again, you know, just read that chapter.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that-
very interesting.
It stuck.
That's
Even
very
look, it
interesting.
still stuck with me. I think
Yeah.
of this fictional story. I don't even think he was Jewish. He didn't write Jewish.
James Mystery. I don't even know.
But the source, you know,
Wow,
made
wow.
up a story about period in history and the
Yeah, yeah.
characters.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe, yeah, I think he played with a lot of the ideas.
That's so interesting. Do you want to ride to the Trumpiad? I'm going up to the Rimon. Do you want to ride to the? Does that help you?
And I pointed out that.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, well.
Oh, it's Friday Shabbos.
I
Oh, I didn't turn off the
Thank you. I pointed out